Sir Ivor Roberts. Good morning to you, Sir Ivor Roberts.
Good morning.
People will, I suppose, remember you, or many people will indeed, from your time as ambassador here, Her Majesty's ambassador in Ireland. You had a long and varied career in the British diplomatic service, including, I think, a stint as head of counter-terrorism at the British Foreign Office. Now, this body to which you belong, the Counter-Extremism Project, just explain a little bit about what that does and what it has to offer.
Well, it's about 3 years old, and it's a non-profit, non-partisan international policy organisation which brings together world leaders and former diplomats, from senators in the US to people like David Trimble, closer to home, who want to work to combat the dangers from extremism, to raise awareness of the threat, and to disrupt extremist recruitment networks and their financial networks as well, which is equally important.
And in the Irish context, you've warned that this country is vulnerable to becoming a base from where ISIL could plan an attack. Now, what is it about our situation that makes us vulnerable?
Well, it's not just me saying that. The EU Commissioner for Security warned 4 months ago, I think, that Ireland was vulnerable to what he described as low-cost terrorism. He's pointed to the lack of reciprocity between European law enforcement agencies, which does weaken European defence against transnational terrorism. And I think in May, a former Al-Qaeda member warned that Ireland was, quotes, a soft touch for a terror attack. He said that terrorists saw Ireland as a safe haven because it didn't have a central domestic intelligence service and relied on foreign intelligence agencies to protect it from threats. Now, I think that's not my assessment from my time as ambassador in Dublin. I thought the Garda commissioner with whom I had regular contacts was certainly clear to me that Ireland took the intelligence aspects of its work extremely seriously. But I mean, there's another sort of aspect, which is that, and this is from Irish sources itself, security sources, saying that there were, I think, some 30 Irish foreign fighters from the Syrian war theatre who they thought were likely to return to Ireland. And clearly, as Islamic State's territorial hold weakens under pressure from the coalition forces, their aim is to use their returning fighters and other sleepers to carry out attacks. And I don't think anyone, whether they're in a country like Britain or Spain or Ireland, can remain complacent about the risk.
And what preparations, maybe some of them are here already or are on their way, I mean, what should the Gardaí and the security authorities be doing about that?
Well, they should be working very closely, and I'm sure they are, with their international counterparts to track the movements of such people. There's an Al-Qaeda suspect who's been in court in Philadelphia recently, who is believed to be a member of an Ireland-based cell, and goes by the name Black Flag. And the ability of American or British or Irish forces to contain this depends very much on their close cooperation and exchanges of information and intelligence. But I think governments beyond that should be, and I've listened with great interest and respect to what the Imam said, and I think he's absolutely right in terms of grassroots and community level de-radicalisation or prevention of radicalisation. But governments should also be looking to pressure social media companies to take action and rid their sites of extremist and terrorist content. There could be much more done, I think, by all governments and by the European Union as a whole to strengthen regulation and to fine companies not just social media platforms, but these encrypted messaging companies, to reduce the threat from terrorist recruitment.
Yeah, those companies, they guard their independence, they guard the privacy and the security of communications of their users. They very jealously indeed. I mean, we saw a very high-profile incident of it, I think, where was it Apple refused in the United States to provide access to information that would have been very useful to the authorities there. But do you think that there's much more could be done? You clearly do, obviously, by those companies.
I do. I mean, there's a technology which has been developed called eGlyph technology, which is a hashing technology which can vastly reduce the volume of terrorist content on sites like Apple, Google, etc. And I think the more that tech companies can be pressured by governments to remove extremist and terrorist material and not simply say, we can't interfere, we must allow unrestricted, encrypted messaging to continue. That may be the tech companies' approach, but governments have a responsibility for the security of their citizens. That's the prime responsibility of any government. And it's I think clear that tech companies only really respond when they're threatened with regulation or possibly a loss of advertising revenue. And anything that heightens the media attention on the issue, I think, can only be helpful in putting pressure on.
And what do you do with a company, say, like an app like WhatsApp, for instance? Again, secure communications. They say they can't access it themselves. Now, do you believe that actually is not the case?
I think they can. I think they can if they want, and I think they should take much. I mean, these companies can be used to trigger attacks. So it's a really extreme and poisonous and toxic use of the internet, and I think these companies do have the means to filter out messaging and organizations like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, etc., who use and exploit these social media means.
And we spoke just a few minutes ago to Dr. Al-Qadri about the jihadists' ability to infect young minds. I mean, there's one site, for instance, like Telegram. It uses encrypted messaging systems. They're actively used and indeed, I think, recommended by ISIL and other jihadists to assist, to plan, to coordinate and execute mass murders. But Telegram's founder, Pavel Durov, he says that he won't take down these private ISIL or Al-Qaeda or Taliban chats, indeed, saying the right to privacy is more important to Telegram than our fear of bad things happening like terrorism.
Well, that's maybe his approach, but I think if governments attempted to internationally regulate companies like Telegram and restricted any advertising revenue that they were able to accrue, then that he might sing a different tune. For him, I think his line is, what am I supposed to do if people use the media for bad purposes? That's not my problem. Well, I think it has to be made his problem if he doesn't get any revenue, if he's regulated and interfered with to take his responsibilities more seriously. I think he may sing a different tune.
And in the Irish and indeed the wider European and British context, I know before the Brexit referendum in the UK last year, we spoke to Hugh Orr, the former Chief Constable in the PSNI, and now I think working with the police in the UK. He was very concerned that Brexit could lead to a weakening of security cooperation. What's your view on that?
Well, I hope it doesn't. I think everything's still up in the air. We've seen the latest round of Brexit negotiations, which seem to be going at a snail-like pace. I think the question of cooperation, whatever the state of the border between the North and the Republic ends up being, and I hope it's as transparent and unencumbered as possible, the need for close cooperation, as I saw every day when I was in Dublin, between the Garda Commissioner and people like Hugh Ward, who was the head of policing in Northern Ireland at that time, was incredibly close. They were on the phone to each other several times a day, and that must continue. It's absolutely imperative that nothing post-Brexit interferes with that.
Meanwhile, and finally, Sir Ivor Roberts, is it true that you've taken the step of acquiring an Irish passport for ease of passage through the various European airports and other ones, perhaps, in the aftermath of Brexit?
No, it's not for ease of transport. That's
ease of passage.
Most facile. Ease of passage. I mean, that's a facile approach. I was horrified by the outcome of the Brexit referendum. I've got Irish roots. My father was born in Ireland. My grandmother came from a County Waterford family. I feel that I don't want to be excluded from European citizenship, if that's the right term. And that's why I decided that I would exercise my right to an Irish passport because, in fact, under Irish law, simply having a parent born on the island of Ireland is enough to qualify you for Irish citizenship automatically. So, in fact, all I was doing was exercising my right to an outward sign of citizenship in the shape of a passport.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Sir Ivor Roberts, former British ambassador to Ireland and current board member of the County